Welcome to Commsverse. This session, the Flipped Meeting, is presented to you by Chris Hoard. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks ever so much. Welcome again to Commsverse. I hope you've had a great conference so far. We're getting towards the end now, but I've got the opportunity to have a third session, and this is called the Flip Meeting. I'm really excited. But before we start today, just a quick shout out to all of the sponsors to this event, to the organisers, Mark, Martin and Randy. I spoke for them earlier on in the year at the Commsverse in-store event, so I'm just really made up that I can see it through from beginning to end. Now this session, what to expect from today, what to expect from the Flip Meeting, is basically broken down into three parts. First, we're going to explore what is the Flip Meeting. Second, we're going to see how we can implement it. And third, we're going to wrap the session up with some calls to action. Now, this is an introductory and conceptual session. It's a level 100 session, so we're not going to venture too far into the reads. It's intended to give you some new thoughts and to have some takeaways that you can go and implement straight away. So before we get to the concept of what is the Flip Meeting, I think it's best to start off with some statistics and to explore what the problems are with meetings today for many organizations. So looking at the statistics, firstly for Microsoft, they ran a report a few years ago, 60% are unsatisfied with their current meetings. Now that can be for a number of reasons, but the statistic that jumps out is that more people reported back than less that they were unsatisfied with their current meetings. Secondly, 57% find their meetings unproductive. This means that they are spending time within those meetings and feel like that they're not getting anything from them. This could be because of the way that their meetings are organized, or they feel like they're not getting the chance to contribute, and that there is never really any action or outcomes from those meetings. In addition to the statistics that we saw a few years for Microsoft, if we look at the statistics that have come out from the HR Digest, 4 workdays on average are lost to bad meetings every month for the office professional. That is a huge amount when you tally up. That is nearly 50 days a year that could be lost to having bad meetings. Now, if we think of the situation today in the world with COVID-19 and the challenges that businesses are facing, they really need to be tail to teeth. They can't have this amount of days wasted on unproductive meetings. And they also did a study of the impact to the US economy of all those ineffective and unproductive meetings. $37 billion a year. That is a huge amount of money to waste. That is a huge amount of money that businesses cannot afford to spend. So when we start thinking about this, when we start thinking about those numbers, I think that if you look at literature online that is coming from Microsoft and several other sources, we can pinpoint common issues. We can also take these from our own experience. Number one, attendees are often unprepared when they come to the meeting. They get sent out a meeting invitation. They probably don't look, if it hasn't already got notes in that booking, they probably don't look at it before they come to the meeting. They don't know what to expect. They don't know and haven't done any prior research. So they come to that meeting totally unprepared. Secondly, meetings tend to be in a chalk and talk format. That's a term that is borrowed from teaching here in the UK, where one person gets up and lectures the attendees in the meeting. Now, this could be somebody who's in a senior position within that meeting or the meeting organizer. These meetings are largely PowerPoint based in a chalk and talk without any opportunity for attendees to interact. Third, we often see in meetings that there are monopolies where certain individuals weigh in, provide their opinions to the expense of all others. Fourth, meetings are often unfocused or of low value. There is no outcomes at the end of it. They are often rambling affairs which go on with no clear outcomes, no clear decisions that are made, and we often have to come back and venture into meetings afterwards. Fifth, meetings often overrun or start late, often because of the issues that I've described previously. It could be that people haven't planned for them very well, or they just ramble on and then eat into other people's time. And last of all, too many meetings or recycling. So if we have unfocused meetings that are low value, it is typical that we will see the same agenda come up in meetings again and again. And I think it's a common problem amongst all of us working, particularly in business environments, that we have lots of meetings, and many of us from time to time often have to proactively try to cull back on those meetings. So bearing in mind the statistics that many people are unsatisfied, that they feel that meetings are unproductive, if we think about the impact that's having to businesses in terms of productivity and the cost, and if we kind of know we have a general consensus over what these pinpointed issues are, we can then begin to act and start rethinking about how we do meetings. Now, one of the ways we can do that is to really look at the necessity of meetings. Do we even need these meetings at all? If I put myself in the position of a chief financial officer, then I'm going to be looking at the time and the cost. So everyone who is in that meeting, how much are they getting paid to attend that meeting? How much is the opportunity cost of them making money for the business whilst they are holding these meetings? In addition to time and cost, there is also this idea of utility. What is going to be the return on the investment in that meeting? What production is each person who attended that meeting going to have after that meeting? How much has it benefited all attendees? How much has that meeting benefited the business? Now, this is really, really important because we have a kind of perfect tool here with Microsoft Teams. So by thinking about necessity, do we need a meeting at all when we have all these different things that we can currently do in Microsoft Teams? We can have group chats. We can co-author documents. We can have task-based activities. We can have snap polls. We can put videos into our teams. We can also run reports from Power BI and have recurring conversations. So first of all, we need to be able to use necessity to even start to have, and start thinking about scheduling our meeting. Secondly, you may have heard this term that Microsoft used. It's called the intelligent meeting lifecycle. It is all about structuring and the choreography of the meeting experience. Now, the intelligent meetings lifecycle is a bit like a play in 3 acts. We split it into 3 parts. The first, there is the pre-meeting. So in the pre-meeting, we think about the type of meeting that we are going to have with teams. Are we going to have a private scheduled meeting, or are we going to have a live event? We would think about the scheduling. Are we going to schedule it through Microsoft Teams, or are we going to schedule it through Outlook? We think about the roles, the presenter and attendee roles within that meeting, and what you can do when the meeting comes around. And we also start thinking about the audience that we are going to invite with this meeting. So the pre-meeting is all about what we do before the meeting is actually in play and being executed. The second act, as it were, is all about the meeting itself. Are we going to have a lobby for that meeting in order to control the attendees coming in? What are we going to do about sharing the resources? Are we going to add them into the chat? Are we going to go and send them afterwards? How are we going to present? Are we going to be using PowerPoints? Are we going to be using the whiteboard? And it's also about the meeting controls too. Thirdly, the last part is all about the post-meeting. Do we have tasks to follow up? Do we take notes? Are we going to record this meeting and send it to anyone who hasn't attended, or are we going to email those details out? So this idea of necessity and this idea of the intelligent meeting life cycle, the ability to structure our meetings and use choreography, can take us so far in terms of having a successful meeting. But the third point, and the one that I would like to introduce today, is this idea of the flipped meeting. Now, the flipped meeting really has three important points to consider, three characteristics, as you will. The first is that it contains no instructional or learning material. So instead of having our meetings where people sit in them and you have this chalk and talk and people are being instructed within for large parts of that meeting, you do not do this at all in the flip meeting. What you actually do is you provide all that information prior to the meeting, and the attendees are expected to consume that information and understand it prior to actually being in the meeting. So it's really important on this first point that attendees come with prior learning. It's our responsibility as organisers to put them in the best position to both enter that meeting and to contribute to that meeting. And this leads us on to point two. Point two about the flip meeting is focusing on active participation, collaboration, inclusiveness, and decision making. This isn't a meeting where one person is going to talk and all of the other attendees are going to sit back and listen to them. This isn't a meeting where you have one or two attendees are going to monopolize and push their opinions ahead of all others. This requires every single person within that meeting to be active, have their opinions known and shared, working together on a solution to a problem, and every person's opinion or professional opinion matters. Third, the organizer of the meeting or the person leading the meeting guides the attendees. They do not lecture them. This is not a meeting to implant or embed information into the attendees. This is about meetings that put the attendees first. This is about bringing people well prepared to a meeting where you can get the very best out of them. We're all adults. They have been hired to be able to do a job. They must come along to the meeting and be able to contribute. So understanding what the flipped meeting is. The flipped meeting is actually an extension of what we call the flipped classroom. Now, before I came into IT about 12 years ago, I was a secondary school teacher, teaching geography in a secondary school here in the UK. And the flipped classroom is a concept which is very similar. So in the flipped classroom, the students do all of their kind of learning and the consuming of the information outside of the classroom, and this can be through things like online lectures, and they then attend the lesson to do active collaboration. They carry out all of their research at home, they engage with those concepts in the classroom, and the teacher therefore becomes a mentor as opposed to a lecturer in that classroom. Now, there is a whole wealth of research and learning that underpins this. One of those is this idea, as you'll see down the bottom, of Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy is a whole system for measuring learning of certain values. Right at the bottom, you can see there, remembering and understanding, these two elements of which meetings are made up of a lot today, is right down the bottom. What we want to see is we want to see analysis, we want to see evaluation, we want to see creation and the use of these higher order skills. Now, the flipped classroom has been very, very successful over the last 20 years or so. And there are many case studies that you will see online. There's one here on the right hand side. Does the flipped classroom work? Well, in this case study, which was a Cliftondale High School in the US, Before they used the flipped classroom, they had a 44% failure rate, and after using it, that dropped off significantly. And the flipped classroom is a strategy that a lot of teachers want to be able to apply, and many here in the UK do apply today to very successful results. So the flipped meeting is really an extension of the flipped classroom. They are both what you would call blended learning, and there has been a long line of development and history around this. So this isn't something that has come along yesterday. This is something that has been kind of developing for many years. Back in the 1960s, this is when we first started seeing the use of technology for learning. So the use of mainframes and terminals. There was a system called Plato in the University of Illinois. A little bit later in the 1970s, this is when you started to get the theories of socialization and how people learn and contribute through observing others. And this point is kind of quite crucial, because if you think about meetings today where people sit in there and you have this environment where somebody is lecturing and talking and the others are all passively non-participating in that meeting, that's a perfect example of how people are picking up on other people's behaviors and propagating the problem. So in the 1960s, we saw about how technology can benefit learning. And in the 1970s, we saw about how socialization and the beginnings of collaboration can also benefit learning. We then saw these over the course of the 1980s, 1990s, come together, and in the early 2000s, that is when the approach came about of combining the best in the use of technology and the benefits with the benefits of socialization. So that was the period when the flipped classroom emerged as a theory and teachers started to use it. And so it was at the beginning of this decade when business started to pick up on this and started to apply it to meetings and their business environments. So this is the application of flipping to the meeting. So flip meetings have been going for the best part of 10 years, but they're only beginning to really take hold in businesses today. And some of the examples, very visible examples, the first is that Jeff Bezos at Amazon uses the flip meeting for the majority of his meetings. What he actually does is he distributes a 6-page briefing paper ahead of that meeting. That briefing paper is expected to have been read or is read in the very first part of the meeting. The discussion and the decision making then ensues, and that is all facilitated by a host. That host is not lecturing, is not teaching or imparting information to those individuals, but is facilitating the discussion and the collaboration after the users have read up on the briefing. LinkedIn is also another good example. They provide attendees to their meetings with slide decks provided 24 hours in advance so they can be studied and analysed. At the meeting start, they define the roles and expectations. The discussion and collaboration then ensue, and the attendees then self-identify the actions with which to take away. I'm sure that Microsoft have this practice of flip meetings too, but Amazon and LinkedIn are case studies that you can literally, if you type them into your browser, you can go and find online. So let's compare the typical meeting. Let's say we had a decision on 3 products that we should prioritize this month, and we had the group of individuals in our meeting. But in a typical meeting, this is what it would look like. Without any prior actions, you normally see meetings where you would have an introduction. That introduction can be anywhere to a few minutes to up to 10 minutes when you come to account for people turning up late to the meeting, for having no clear objectives, for having people or pulling them or reining them in where they are on their phones or they haven't brought the right equipment. You then have a big part of the meeting that is lecture style, presenting the information, running through all the products, the pros and cons, and then you may or may not have some unstructured discussion without any prior learning. But a big part of this meeting is it could be anywhere up to 50 minutes where many users are not actively participating. It's all passive participation. The amount of times I've seen people in meetings that are on their phones, that are sitting there with a glazed look on their face because they've literally taken too much information in. They're thinking about what they have to do, that are getting resentful because they feel like it's a waste of their day. They then, right at the very end, they may or may not have a Q&A and decision making. And 10 minutes is very little time to be able to gather your thoughts, synthesize all that information, and have that really informed decision making. That is a place where you tend to get this monopoly and one or two people jump in and then the group just nods and goes with their decisions or opinions. In a flip meeting, this looks totally different. Imagine we had the same scenario. We had a decision on 3 products we should prioritize this month. The actions would be set prior to that meeting. The attendees should review the products of which should be prioritized. They should look at the sales statistics, the product reviews, and any functionality adds to the products during that month. They can then come armed with a lot of information. They may have discussed it with each other already. Right at the beginning of the flip meeting, there's a test to see their learning and if they have followed the actions which are prior to that meeting. And then the majority of the meeting is an actual group exercise where the attendees as a team present their case to the group. They collectively decide on products. They utilize that prior knowledge information to actually pinpoint and locate the 3 products you should actually prioritize. They then agree on the actions for promoting these products. So from a business perspective, the time that you've set aside for this meeting in the business, you're actually getting your attendees, your employees collaborating. They're actually making good and valuable use of their time. It's also active participation. They've had significant time prior to the meeting to be able to synthesize all the information. They can base it on informed decision, and they are all prepared with their prior understanding. At the end, you as the facilitator can then ask for ownership and feedback, which they can then also agree with themselves. And the results of holding meetings like this, I've held meetings like this, the satisfaction rate is a lot better. People have felt they've made a difference, they felt included, they're helping to make a decision on things moving forward. So how does this all fit into the intelligent meeting lifecycle? How does it fit into the choreography? This is again where Teams is the perfect tool. So when we think about this idea of flipping in the meeting, there is many things that we can do in the pre-meeting to be able to get the information that we want attendees to know prior to that meeting. So the first one, a memo in Microsoft Word. You can see here, I have my team and I have my general channel. I can send meetings like memos with Microsoft Word into the team so users can begin to think about that straight away. I can mention the whole team who will be coming to the meeting. I can tell them what I want them to think about. I can tell them what the expectations will be, and then they can easily access their file and begin to consume that information immediately. Just waiting for this to load up. Secondly, in addition to using Microsoft Word and memos the way that Jeff Bezos at Amazon does, we can also record videos and put this in stream. So we can bring information to the users through video. So again, in Microsoft Teams, I'm just going to click on this section here called Stream Recordings. So with inside the Teams, I can put the videos that I want them to be able to watch and consume before that meeting has taken place. I can put a link in through the chat. I can also reference videos on public video platforms. Like Microsoft Word and the memo, you are bringing in this video for them to be able to watch and to consume and to be able to have them and build their opinions or build their analysis before they're entering the meeting. There are a few other ways we can do this prior to the meeting. We can do it with Power Apps. So you can bring all your information together in a Power App. Now this, what I'm just about to show you, is an app that I built in a former presentation for demonstration purposes. So if I click the start button, you can see this is an app that's based upon the bios of individuals. If I go into this section here, you can see that I'm surfacing a video, I'm surfacing information about Adam, his profile, his Twitter links, the clients he's worked with. But this type of app, you can assimilate and bring all of your information together, and you can build an app like this using Power Apps in the space of 30 minutes to an hour. You can synthesize and bring all your information and put it into your team. Fourth, you can surface Power BI reports. So if you want to make data-driven decisions and use the data at the core of your meetings, and for people to be able to look at this data in meetings and work on the decisions, you can again bring Power BI reports. So if I now click on the Power BI report that I built in Power BI and surfaced it into Microsoft Teams, we can then bring this right into the decision-making process. We can have people attend, our attendees, our colleagues sit down in a room and then say, look, your task as a group is to work out or highlight and discuss the insights you've seen from this data, having provided it to them beforehand. They're going to be much more valuable having considered opinions than presenting this in the actual meeting, because they will have to take time to synthesize and fish out their actual insights. And fourthly, you can also do this via tasks and planner. So you can drive actions prior to the meeting with planner. Again, if I come into the team and I click on my plan, let's say, for example, I want all the attendees to be able to read the memo, watch the videos, use the Power App and analyze their Power BI reports. I can set that for them to do within Planner. So we have a wealth of tools here that can be used before you even get into that meeting to provide all of the information up front. During that second act, during the meeting itself, again, we can use all of the applications within Microsoft Teams whilst the team are collaborating together. We can use polls or forms to assess the prior understanding or to be able to make decisions. So you can surface Microsoft Forms in Teams. Now this is literally a form that has just been created. I haven't kind of added anything to this, but you can put your own questions for your attendees in here, or get them to create one and to be able to assess each other. Secondly, we've got the ability to draw with the Microsoft Whiteboard. So we could build that up during a meeting for the attendees to work on together. So if we go into the calendar and we see that we have our meeting that's set on Friday, if I click that meeting, I then have a whiteboard. So this is just going to take a second to be able to open up. I'm going to select a pen, so I can start then working on that before the meeting. So that's really good for things like mind mapping or drawing out processes together. We can use OneNote. So everything that our team puts down within, and they can take the minutes, the attendee, as opposed to anyone else having to do for them. They can put down their minutes, they can put down their inputs, they can put down their thoughts. They can all work collaboratively together using the meeting notes. Just going to call that up. that can be set during the meeting. What insights they have come to with each other, what solutions they have designed together, what actions they have identified together, and what blockers they have identified together. Last but not least, though this is a functionality that is coming in that has been announced for later on this year, you will also have breakouts with Microsoft Teams. Now, if you go onto blogs online today, you will be able to see how people have designed workarounds to using breakouts, but later on this year, you will have that functionality so that in breakout rooms, 2s or 3s can go away together to devise a solution and then come back into the main meeting where they can then present to the rest of the group. I also skipped over here, Office apps. That is another way to build content out during the meeting. So if we think of Word, if we think of Excel, if we think of PowerPoint, again, these are all surfaceable within Microsoft Teams. This could be, or the point of the meeting could be to put together a deck of those products to go out for the next webinar. That deck can be created by all of the attendees in the meeting, all working on it together in Microsoft Teams. Now, if we think, we've talked about the pre-meeting and we've talked about the meeting itself and executing in the meeting, there is also the post-meeting. So after the post-meeting, this is all about ownership and actions and who's going to go away and deliver on what was decided within that meeting collaboratively between all of the attendees. There are several ways in which to do that. We've got this idea of feedback and polls through forms, which we've already seen. We've got the idea that the organizer can make another video to present back those ideas to the attendees, and they can surface that up through Stream into Microsoft Teams. So if we go into back into our recordings, we can create another new video and pipe it into our actual team. Again, we have OneNote to be able to put those actions together. We can use Planner, as we did in the pre-meeting, to have follow-up tasks that people have to actually act on. So I would come back into my Planner, and once those tasks had been completed, so if Adam, for example, in my team, and Vesku and Amanda had come, we would then start to create some more tasks. And then we have Teams itself. So the meeting and the collaboration doesn't have to end at that point. Actions have been identified. The team can continue to work on them through chat. They can have follow-up calls. They would have their file storage all there for them to be able to co-author documents. So working this into the intelligent meeting lifecycle, we have this idea going back, this idea of necessity. Should we have the meeting at all? We've got our structure with the intelligent meeting lifecycle, but we can now put in the strategy, the flipped strategy inject it into that intelligent meeting lifecycle. In the pre-meeting, where we have considered the type of meeting, whether it's a meeting or whether it's a live event, where we've considered how we've scheduled that meeting with Outlook or Teams, where we've considered the roles and the audience, we can now begin to consider the prior learning. What do we want individuals to come into the meeting with? What prior learning and understanding must they have for them to be able to contribute, collaborate, and we get the biggest return on investment from that individual? Secondly, within the meeting, beforehand, we would think about the roles people have, whether they're presenter or attendees, whether the lobby was on, how we would share our materials, whether it's through PowerPoint or whiteboard, and we would consider the controls within that meeting. We're now also starting to think about our strategy for how users are going to collaborate together. Because previously, all we did was, it was really easy for us. We would share a PowerPoint and somebody would talk off of that PowerPoint with passive participation. By moving to a flipped model of meetings, we are thinking most of all about how users are going to collaborate, how we're going to get them involved, how they are going to make a contribution, and to make sure that they are included because their opinion matters. Thirdly, in terms of the post meeting, previously we talked about tasks and notes and recording, this idea that people would have the follow-up actions and they would pick them up afterwards and they would look at them afterwards. In the flip meeting, that we are now thinking about inclusive outcomes. We're thinking about agreements and defined actions and owners for those actions before we've walked out to the meeting. We want them thinking and engaged and beginning to act on them before the meeting has even ended. So the insight, I guess, that we can glean from injecting that flipped meeting model into the intelligent meeting lifecycle is that it doesn't just have to be one way. It doesn't just have to be a memo at the start each and every time. It doesn't just have to be a PowerPoint session within a meeting, and then it doesn't just have to be tasks or notes to follow up on afterwards. With Teams, you have access to all of these different applications, and you can do it any which way that you choose, and you can try different applications to use within a flipped meeting model. So for example, at the top here, I can do what Jeff Bezos does and send out a memo before the meeting. In the meeting, when users are actually collaborating actively together, we would use Microsoft Teams, and we could use OneNote alongside that in order to be able to capture the decisions and outcomes, and we can follow that up using Planner and the setting of tasks before the meeting ends going into the post. Alternatively, we don't have to do it that way at all. We could use Stream in the pre-meeting. We could record the video because lots of people are visual learners. Once they have consumed the video, they can then come into the meeting, and we can use forms in order to be able to test their prior learning. We can then have our discussion, and we can have our exercises and collaboration. And then in the post meeting, if there are any kind of follow-ups, we can then have the feedback and use again something such as Planner, or use something such as continuing to use Teams to carry on the conversation about ownership. So the insight here is that with Teams, you have many ways to implement this flipped meeting model. Now, moving towards the end of this talk today, we have to consider the benefits and challenges of this strategy, of this approach. The flipped meeting is active, it is inclusive, and is democratic. It is designed for people to be able to be active and collaborate and contribute. It's about valuing everyone's opinions in that meeting, not just the organizer, not just the most senior person in the room, not somebody in the C-level. Their opinion of course matters, but everyone else who has attended that meeting's opinion and input matters too. Secondly, it's all about fostering collaboration and a shared ownership of decisions. If we're working in business together, it's important that we all have a stakehold and in the decisions that get made in that meeting. We do not want an exclusive environment. We do not want only a small amount of individuals making the decisions for the expense of all others. It is also not just about talking and communicating about the decisions, it's also collaborating. It's also using tools such as Word, such as Power BI, such as video, to be able to actively collaborate together. Third, it's all about the generation of ideas and perspectives. You could have your employees, or you could have your co-workers, or you could have your attendees come in, and they could look at the PowerPoint, and they would have this. We've all heard of the concept death by PowerPoint, and they could walk out of the meeting. The next time you do that, ask them a question as they walk out of the meeting, and see if they remembered the content you have shown within that meeting, because most end up drifting off. Most end up thinking about the stuff that they are doing for the rest of their day. Or a lot of individuals that I've seen surf through meetings, they turn up, they're the ones that often don't talk, and then they kind of they give themselves a little break mentally and then get on with the rest of their day. You have to think about the strategy, the content of the meeting. What do you want people to produce? And some of the most valuable things are ideas and the perspectives that they can bring back to the business. That is a much bigger return on investment than teaching them things that they could have done prior to the meeting in their own time during work, and would have probably thought about it and generated those ideas and insights, and they're ready to go once they've entered the meeting. Fourth, it's all about increasing the morale too. You want people to feel like, as said, that they have this stakeholder, that they're engaged, that they need to feel that the business that they're either working with or they work for cares about them and cares about their opinions. If you were to do satisfaction surveys after a standard meeting and after a flipped meeting, you will often find that people come out feeling that they've either learned more, or they felt like they've made more of a contribution in a flipped meeting. And lastly, this is a really important time for a lot of businesses. During COVID-19, many businesses are really, really challenged. So we need to be able to help them to reduce the amount of time that's being wasted by having unproductive meetings. We've seen the statistics right at the beginning. 57% feel like their meetings are unproductive. 60% are unsatisfied with meetings. Again, that's just a shocking figure, because that means that more people do not like meetings that attend than do attend. The negatives for meetings all up are huge. But I want to be kind of completely open and honest that I'm not trying to sell you something. Whilst there are benefits, there are also challenges to making this work within an organization. First of all, there is a culture change. Many people are not used to doing meetings in this way. So it takes a little bit of time, it takes a little bit of testing and to see the positive results before people will buy in to holding meetings like this. Yes, the Amazon case study and the LinkedIn case study are two examples of where this is benefiting today. If you look into education and the flipped classroom, there are many more other case studies. But you will want to try this from yourself, and it may not go right first time around. You'll want to persist with it and see how it works for you. Secondly, the host has to be active. It cannot be a case that the host organizes it, comes into the room, and then needs to sit down and let everyone just kind of get on and do what they want. The host is a facilitator and a mentor there to be able to drive the conversation, drive the decision making. There needs to be a really proactive host in this. And lastly, it shouldn't be used for every meeting. What I mean by that is that we don't just want to take all the meetings in our business and suddenly change them over to having a flip strategy. If you use it in the same way for every meeting, then you are going to fall into the problems of the past where people are not going to engage so much or are not going to be. So use it every now and then to flip up how you do meetings. But don't use it for every single meeting that you do. So, calls to action, really, really simple. Try using the flip meeting strategy today. Try it for some of your meetings. I'd really like to hear how it would go. You can contact me, for example, over social media and see if it worked for your organization. Second, use it alongside other meeting strategies, such as this idea of necessity and the intelligent meeting lifecycle. Because having a strategy and flipping the meeting is good, but having that structure as the intelligent meeting lifecycle that Microsoft evangelizes to be used with Microsoft Teams is very, very impactful. And third, gauge sentiment and feedback. Don't just have sentiment and feedback for the meetings that you run with a flip meeting strategy. Also take sentiment and feedback before you actually do it, so that you can actually compare and contrast and see if it has had a beneficial effect. If it is, then you can actually show within your organization that it had some positive outcomes, and it has had positive impact in terms of how productive people feel that they are, how satisfied they are with their meetings, and that you get a bigger return on investment of those meetings. So returning to outcomes then, we've looked at what is the flip meeting. We've looked at how we can use Microsoft Teams with a flipped meeting strategy, and we finally rounded off with some calls to action. So I'd like to take the time now to wish you the best of luck with this. I would like to thank ever so much for coming and spending your time to learn about this. The online session survey is right there, online.comsverse.com session-survey. And just to see from the producer today, has there been any questions that I could possibly answer at the end of this session?
Hey, thank you, Chris, very much. We do have one question. What suggestions do you have to change the culture to facilitate the flipped meetings? For example, when I have tried to assign pre-work before, the feedback received was that they were unaware, just went into the meeting like normal.
There are a couple of ways that you can go from this perspective. The first, it's important right at the start, if you're starting to try and build a culture of holding these meetings in a flip method, is to get buy-in, is to be able to get a group of willing participants in order to be able to do the meeting. And then once you have those willing participants that are willing to be able to do it, and the important thing is to make this transparent to people. Tell them right up front what it is that you're doing, the reasons why you are doing it. You can also start with often doing a poll or getting feedback, particularly in one-to-ones or having it within groups, about what makes for bad meetings, what they feel about the meetings today, and how do they feel that they can be improved. So what you're doing is that you're making them open to trying something new, but you're also kind of reifying the feedback back upon them to say, look, here is some kind of things that you want to improve about this meeting. How about we participate in this and see where we go? The meeting itself cannot fall back into this kind of lecture and passive participation. And it has to be activity based, it has to be collaborative, so that it's an exercise or it's an analysis where you work within groups, or you have a kind of decision making matrix, or you're producing some kind of content within that, or you are decision making, and the host plays a big part of that. So the host, you might have to do more work as a host to start out with, you might have to drive it a bit more. Now, one of the great ways also is this idea of testing for prior learning right at the beginning of the conversation, because you will find out very quickly who does it right and who hasn't done it. And people don't want to be able to be seen that in front of their peers. Now, this is this point I was talking about earlier about socialization. People begin to pick up on other people doing it. So if you get a couple of, or should I say, probably more than a couple, like 4, 5, 6 people who are in this, the others will follow, because they will pick up upon what others are doing and they will then participate. You might not get it in the first, second, or even the third one, but you keep bringing in this style and people will kind of learn after a period of time. I've had some people in my own business that didn't like doing this method to start with, and today they're the most active contributors, but it took a few months in order to be able to get in there. I would never go down the route of, I guess you could say, bringing an authoritative approach or disciplinary action, but after that if they came along and they've not done the prior learning and they've not consumed the material, you can always talk to them afterwards and say, it's your responsibility of your job to understand this before you come into the meeting. Can you give me a reason why you haven't done that? And have that real kind of open conversation with them. So by doing those things, it then hopefully picks up over time. There are other methods for being that you can see that work with flipped classrooms online. So there's loads of material out there about how to execute this successfully. But I found those things in particular have worked really well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you for that, Chris. I appreciate the well thought out answer there. This does conclude the session. Please check out in the Q&A. There is a breakout session that's in the link there, and meet Chris over there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you ever so much again. Enjoy the rest of the conference.